The year of grief, Abu Talib's death in Rajab, the 10th year of the prophethood. Abu Talib fell ill and passed away 6 months after leaving the confinement at Ashashib. In another version, Abu Talib breathed his last in Ramadan, 3 days prior to the death of Khadija. On the authority of Al-Musayyab, when Abu Talib was on the deathbed, the Prophet entered the room where he saw Abu Jahl and Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah. He requested his uncle, "My uncle, you just make a profession that there is no true God but Allah, and I will bear testimony before Allah of your being a believer." Abu Jahl and Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah, addressing him, said, "Abu Talib, would you abandon the religion of Abu Talib?" The messenger of Abu Muttalib, the messenger of Allah, constantly requested him to accept his offer, and on the other hand was repeated the same statement of Abu Jahl and Abdullah bin Abu Umayyah, till Abu Talib gave his final decision and he stuck to the religion of Abdul Muttalib and refused to profess that there is no true God but Allah. Upon this, the Messenger of Allah remarked, "By Allah, I will persistently beg pardon for you till I am forbidden to do so by Allah." It was then that Allah, the Magnificent and Glorious, revealed this verse. It is not proper for the Prophet and those who believe to ask Allah's forgiveness for the mushrikun, polytheists, idolaters, pagans, disbelievers in the oneness of Allah, even though they be of kin, after it has become clear to them that they are the dwellers of the fire because they died in a state of disbelief. And it was said to the Messenger of Allah, "Verily you, O Muhammad, guide not one you like." It goes without saying that Abu Talib was very much attached to Muhammad. For 40 years Abu Talib had been the faithful friend, the prop of his childhood, the guardian of his youth, and in later life a very tower of defense. The sacrifices to which Abu Talib exposed himself and his family for the sake of his nephew, while yet incredulous of his mission, stamp his character as singularly noble and unselfish. The Prophet did his best to persuade his octogenarian uncle to make profession of the true faith. But he remained obdurate and stuck to the paganism of his forefathers and thus could not achieve complete success. Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib narrated that he said to the Prophet, "You have not been of any avail to your uncle Abu Talib, though by Allah he used to protect you and get angry on your behalf." The Prophet said, "He is in a shallow fire, and had it not been for me, he would have been at the bottom of the hellfire." Abu Sa'd al-Khudri narrated that he heard the Prophet say, when the mention of his uncle was made, "I hope that my intercession may avail him, and he be pleased in a shallow fire that rises up only to his heels." Khadija passes away to the mercy of Allah only 2 months after the death of his uncle. Did the Messenger of Allah experience another great personal loss vice? The mother of believers, his wife Khadija, passed away in Ramadan of the 10th year of his prophethood, when she was 65 years old, and he was 50. Khadija was in fact a blessing of Allah for the Prophet. She for 25 years shared with him the toils and trials of life, especially in the first 10 years of his ministry of prophethood. He deeply mourned over her death, and once he replied in an honest burst of tender emotions, "She believed in me when none else did. She embraced Islam when people disbelieved me, and she helped and comforted me in her person and wealth when there was none else to lend me a helping hand. I had children from her only." Abu Huraira reported that Gabriel came to Allah's Messenger and said, "Allah's Messenger, lo, Khadija is coming to you with a vessel of seasoned food or drink. When she comes to you, offer her greetings from her Lord, and give her glad tidings of a palace of jewels, in paradise where there is no noise and no toil." These 2 painful events took place within a short lapse of time, and added a lot to his grief and suffering. The Meccans now openly declared their campaign of torture and oppression. The Prophet lost all hope of bringing them back to the right path, so he set out for Al-Taif, seeking a supportive atmosphere. But there too he was disappointed, and he sustained unbearable tortures and maltreatment that far outweighed his miserable situation in his native town. His companions were on equal footing subjected to unspeakable torture and unbearable oppression, to such an extent that his closest friend Abu Bakr, to escape pressure, fled out of Mecca and wanted to leave for Abyssinia, Ethiopia. If it were not for Ibn al-Daghana, who met him and managed to dissuade him from completing his journey of escape and brought him back under his protection. The death of Abu Talib rendered the Prophet vulnerable, and the polytheists availed them of that opportunity to give free rein to their hatred and high-handedness, and to translate them in terms of oppression and physical tortures. Once an insolent Qurayshite intercepted him and sprinkled sand on his head. When he arrived home, a daughter of his washed the sand away and wept. "Do not weep, my daughter. Allah will verily protect your father." The Prophet said, "Rapid succession of misfortunes led the Prophet to call that period the year of grief and mourning. Thenceforth that year bore that appellation. His marriage to Sauda in Shawwal, the 10th year of prophethood. The death of Khadija left the Prophet lonely. The name of Sauda was suggested to him for marriage, which he accepted. This lady had suffered many hardships for the sake of Islam. She was an early convert to the Islamic faith, and it was by her persuasion that Her husband had embraced Islam on the second immigration to Abyssinia. Ethiopia Sauda had accompanied her husband. He died on their way back to Mecca, leaving her in a terrible state of destitution. She was the first woman for the Prophet to marry after the death of Khadijah. Some years later, she granted her turn with the Prophet to her co-wife Aisha.